Welcome to the Agricultural Technologies subject, offered as part of the agricultural degree at NMIT. Today we're going to discuss Topic 2, the Green Revolution and Genetic Technologies. In this topic we're going to have a series of lectures that follow both the Green Revolution and the history of agriculture, as well as looking at breeding programs, both from a traditional standpoint and a new more modern standpoint, the genetic revolution. In the 1940s through to the 1970s, a series of agricultural research programs were conducted. The outcomes of this research suggested that with modifications to farming practices, significant increases in yield could be obtained. Not only could increases in yield be obtained, but more season-to-season consistency in yield could also be achieved. A number of initiatives were developed to transfer this knowledge to farmers. At the same time, a number of technologies were developed to allow these new initiatives to be uptaken. So it is both the research, the initiatives and the technologies which allowed for what we now call the neo-colonial system of agriculture. The father of the Green Revolution is mostly attributed to Norman Borlaug. He was an American agronomist who did his PhD in plant pathology and genetics. He was able to develop high-yielding varieties of cereal grains. His work, along with others, was rewarded by the receiving of a Nobel Peace Prize, the highest accolade of scientific contribution that one can obtain. He also received a number of other medals and awards that recognize this significant contribution to both science and to agriculture. He was accredited for saving several billion people from starvation during this period. This was achieved by both selecting varieties of cereal grains that produced high yields, along with an expansion of irrigation infrastructure, modernization of management techniques, the distribution of hybridized seeds, as well as the production of new synthetic fertilizers and new pesticides to farmers. Dr. Borlaug had a hypothesis. His hypothesis was that the increasing the productivity of agriculture on the best farmland can help control deforestation by reducing the demand for new farmland. Deforestation was as much of an issue then as it still is today. The theory is simple: high yields, less farmland required, more land for forests. It was thus argued that high-yield technologies are ultimately saving ecosystems from destruction. One of the issues with this hypothesis is that deforestation occurs for many reasons other than just agriculture. It also requires that modern yield production can keep up with global population growth. So let's have a look in some detail about these technologies from the Green Revolution. The first we'll start with is the first one that was achieved. This was the dwarf spring wheat, Trichocalium. The plate on the right hand side of the screen that you're looking at is an image of these screens. This is the traditional wheat and this is the shorter or dwarfer wheat. This dwarf wheat was obtained because a set of genes called NOR110 enabled the plant to take on its dwarfing characteristics. These crops were tested in Mexico, India and Pakistan, and they found that they all significantly increased yields. The figure on the right hand side and the bottom of your screen shows the data. Here is the 1950s with the yield production, and as you can see, each year the practices, this has been increased. This is red for Mexico, India is black and Pakistan is blue. So research continued until 1965 when Borlaug's team were able to produce two semi-dwarf seed varieties, Loma Roja 64 and Songara 64. These seeds were trialled in India and Pakistan. They were transported to both India and Pakistan via Mexico. In Mexico, the shipment received significant damage, and on testing this resulted in significantly reduced germination rates. Borlaug insisted that the sowing densities were adjusted, and the first time they were grown in both India and Pakistan, the highest yield production rates were recorded for Southeast Asia. This was absolutely incredible and a huge step forward for both of these countries. Both of these countries committed to importing large quantities of these seeds. It's interesting, on the first years that these were tested, there was actually war breakout between Pakistan and India, and this made the logistics of testing these crops even more complicated. There were some interesting consequences of Borlaug's varieties. The high yields that they produced led to a shortage of various utilities. For example, they required more labour to harvest the crops. They required more bullock carts to haul it from the threshing floor. They required more jute bags, trucks, rail cars and grain storage facilities. Some local governments were forced to close school buildings temporarily to use them as grain storage. Nice problems to have. So let's look in a bit of detail about these wheat yields. In Pakistan, wheat yields nearly doubled, from 4.6 million tonnes in 1965 to 7.3 million tonnes in 1970. Pakistan was self-sufficient in wheat production by 1968. Interestingly, yields were over 21 million tonnes by 2000. This is very significant for a people that had massive starvation issues on the start of this revolution. India has similar statistics. In India, the yields increased from 12.3 million tonnes in 1965 to 20.1 million tonnes by 1970. By 1974, India was self-sufficient in production of all cereals. By 2000, India was harvesting a record 76.4 million tonnes of wheat. A very impressive outcome of a combination of research and technology. This slide shows a genetic map of some of the dwarfing genes found in wheat varieties. As you can see, there are several families that contribute towards this gene and results in dwarfness and semi-dwarfness. Just to remind you, a gene map is the descriptive representation of the structure of a single gene. If you need reminding more about genes and chromosomes, please refer to the following YouTube link. It is important to remember that there were many researchers and many experiments that led to these improvements. So what were the drivers from the Green Revolution? Well, there was a combination of drivers. There was food security and the role that this played in agriculture. People were starving and more food production was required. Scientific curiosity and advancements. Advancements in the area of science had allowed the production of genetically modified crops and breeding programs to advance. The production of pesticides and chemicals and just applied research all produced very good yield increases. This in turn improved agricultural efficiencies. There were much politics behind the Green Revolution, and some of you've heard. But was there some criticisms behind this? Was there some problems with this great increase in production? There was in fact a downside of the Green Revolution. There was a significant depletion of soil and water quality. There was a rapid exhaustion of non-renewable resources such as oil and phosphates associated with this new farming techniques. There was some loss of the more traditional farming practices. These practices tended to be specific to regions or cultivars, and this knowledge will never be gained again. There was a problem with long-term productivity capacity, or what we refer to as sustainable farming. And the biodiverse approaches to farming were replaced by monocultures. This reduced dietary variation and contributed to malnutrition. The Green Revolution was very famous for the politics that went along with this revolution. There were certainly some great benefits for the development of the technologies in the Green Revolution, but there was also some problems with it. In these next two papers, please see the HTTP link for full papers or refer to Moodle. We are going to have a discussion in the tutorial about these, the pros and the cons. We will start with looking at the crop Golden Rice is No Silver Bullet, which is an article that talks about hunger and the politics around hunger. In the second article we are going to look at, it's Genetically Modified Crop Shrinks Farming Pesticide Footprint. This indeed is one of the positive adaptations of the Green Revolution. So this brings us to the end of this lecture on the Green Revolution. In summary, we have learned that the Green Revolution led to significant improvements in yield to feed starving people. We've also looked at some of the mechanisms which led to this increases. We've looked in detail at some of the examples of the breeding techniques and the genetics which produced the traits that allowed these significant improvements in yield. Improvement of agricultural efficiencies resulted, and it could be argued that this was the start of agriculture being viewed as a commodity rather than an industry that just fed starving people. It also should be noted that many of the techniques used in this Green Revolution are considered non-sustainable farming practices, and they led to resource degradation and issues further down the line. It is fair to say that this was a significant step in agriculture, but has gone a long way to feeding starving people. I hope at the end of this lecture you'll be able to define and describe the Green Revolution, ensure you understand the technological advances that led to this technology, understand the impacts this technology has had on agriculture, and please be able to describe the advantages and disadvantages of this technology and its role in modern day food security.